Hello everyone, I am the Lore Explorer, and this video will contain spoilers for Outer Wilds Echoes of the Eye. If you haven't finished the DLC yet, this was your warning, spoilers are imminent. In Echoes of the Eye, we are introduced to someone that the game names the Prisoner. And despite how pivotal of a character the Prisoner is, we're shown very little about them in their story. So after our impactful encounter with them, a lot of people seem to be wondering a few things. Mainly, why the Prisoner did what they did and freed the Eye's signal, and why they've persevered so long just to end it and deload themselves as soon as they're finally freed. So in today's loop, we're going to try to analyze the Prisoner's story and what we are shown about them. Then, do our best to come to a conclusion based off of in-game information as to why they acted the way they have. We don't get much information about them, so we will have to consume every scrap we do get. And the first glimpse we get of the Prisoner is in the third reel of the Stranger's history. The reel starts just after the Alks have retreated to our solar system after fleeing the Eye. It starts with 7 Alk in the room, all looking towards the new solar system they find themselves in, with our antlered friend being one of them. After looking for a short while, they then move to a projector room where they watch a video of a truly beautiful scene of their original homeworld. All of the Alks watching it break down into tears, and it's easy to see that no one is happy with their new home. And so the Alks begin working on their simulation. And before long, we see it completed, and the Alks all line up with their artifacts to go to sleep. And the reel ends with them all nodding off and entering the simulation. So here, we can watch our friend mourn with their fellow Alks and willingly enter the simulation with all of their companions. The next time we see our friend, they get an entire reel dedicated to them. In the real world, most of the reel is burned and we can't make anything of importance out. But once we do gain access to the vault ourselves, the Prisoner actually shows us the 4th reel in its entirety. The reel begins by focusing on the Prisoner waking up from the simulation. They then sneak their way to the Eye silencing probe's controls and promptly shut the probe off, releasing the Eye signal for anyone to hear. Unfortunately for our friend, it seems like they were noticed at some point, because only shortly after shutting off the probe, the Prisoner gets caught. A bunch of other Alks show up behind them and they get shuttled away and thrown into a diving bell. And inside the diving bell, they built a vault with 3 large chains to lock the Prisoner away in. And the reel ends with the diving bell being lowered and the Prisoner being left to their new fate. Nothing in these reels on their own really tell us anything about the Prisoner's motivation. It just shows us their actions, so it's natural for people to wonder why they would go against their entire species' wishes like this. And since we see so little of them, it's kind of tough to answer. But if we dig deeper, I think we can come to a reasonable enough conclusion. After exploring the dream world thoroughly, we come across one building that seems pretty out of place. At first, I thought this place was a simulated version of the Eye Church, as it's been burned down and it's sort of out of the way from the rest of the town. But it really can't be that, because it wouldn't make any sense for them to simulate a building they just burned down. Plus, it's not really big or grand enough to have been a church. After exploring the building, it became obvious that this was someone's home, and after thinking it through, I'm convinced it's actually the Prisoner's home. After I realized that it wasn't a church, I thought, well, if it's not the church, why the heck is it burned down? And the only conclusion that I could come up with is something must have happened to reawaken the Alks' madness that led them to burn down the original Eye's church to begin with. And the only event that I can think of similar to that was when the Prisoner released the Eye's signal. This would definitely bring back the exact same trauma as when they discovered the original vision, as this is making it possible for that vision to become a reality. So it would make sense that they would take out their rage on the house of the person who made their worst fear possible. Though that's not the only reason I think this is the Prisoner's house. The Alks have also added security measures on the pathway leading to the house, and they added like chains with a cross that says don't come here. But all of the Alks should know how to get past those sentries, and the only people who don't know how to get around them are outsiders and the Prisoner themselves. This could have been set as a trap for the Prisoner if they somehow got out of the vault and decided to try to return home. But one of the main reasons I think this is a prisoner's house is because we find the Auk telescope sitting outside the back door. The only other place we find an Auk telescope inside the entire simulation is here, inside the prisoner's prison tower. And keep in mind, the stars are all simulated here, so there's no real need for telescopes. And below the floor of the dream world, especially where the prisoner is, you can't even see the simulated stars anyway. The only target they have down there is the ringed planet, and that's visible to the naked eye. So I'm thinking they probably keep the telescope as some kind of memento of a former passion. And speaking of mementos, the actual real main reason I think this is a prisoner's house is even after the Auks found the eye and fled the solar system due to that scary vision, we still find a symbol for the eye of the universe inside of this house. It must have been made after the eye was found, since the simulation wasn't created until after the eye was found. Yet here it is in this house, and the only Auk that we know of to have sympathy for the eye is the prisoner. So the only two things we find in this house, the telescope and the eye symbol, are both related to the prisoner in some way. All of that added up seems to paint the picture that this is the prisoner's home to me, and the Auks put the security measures and burned it down so they can never come home even if they escaped. Also likely because they hated the prisoner. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that's what this is. So as of now, we have the last two reels and the ability to explore through the ruins of their old house, which is very little to go on. But we're missing the most important part, which is not the vision the prisoner gives us, but the one that we gave to them. The vision shows the prisoner the history of our solar system to the best of our knowledge. It starts off by showing the Auk's bodies slowly beginning to decay around their base fire until they are a little more than dried leather. Then we zoom out to see all of the trees inside the stranger die and begin to rot away as many years begin to pass. But then we zoom out even more and the reel shows us something awesome. I mean, we actually get to see when the Nomai discovered the signal from the eye and when they warped to our system to follow it. How they warped here only to be caught inside of a dark bramble node and had to use their escape pods to even survive. It shows an abstract depiction of when they crash on Ash Twin and begin building their settlement. And of course, we show the prisoner how the Nomai finally met their tragic end when the interloper entered the solar system and got too close to the sun. After the Nomai perish, we see some time pass and the buildings begin to crumble to dust. Yet right in the middle of all of the rubble, there is one intact piece of wall, and on it is the symbol for the eye of the universe. After a while, a spaceship lands next to the ruins of the Nomai, and Feldspar hops out and takes this piece of the wall and brings it back to the museum, where we show the prisoner how this exact symbol inspired us to go to space ourselves. And the reel ends with us having blasted off into space to begin our journey. And after watching this vision, the prisoner howls as if filled with emotions. They take back their staff from us and ride the elevator up to the top floor alone. But when we follow them, they're nowhere to be found. We only find their staff and footprints leading to the water where the prisoner must have jumped in to extinguish their artifact. But the staff is lit up and the prisoner has left us one last vision. A vision of the two of us on their home moon at sunset. The prisoner loads a telescope onto a raft, then they invite us onto the raft to float off into the sunset together. Now the first reaction I had after seeing these last two visions were to immediately cry. But after my eyes dried, I thought, wow, that was pretty great fan service. But then after I had the pleasure of watching them a few times over, and now that I'm thinking about them, I think they're actually quite significant, and to me they basically explain a lot. Now, it's hard to say exactly why the prisoner went against their species' wishes and actually released the signal, but after taking their whole story into account, it seems to me that the prisoner was an adventurer at heart. The last vision they left for us indicates that they enjoyed spending their time exploring and discovering things, and if they had their way, that's probably what they'd be doing right now. And both in their home and in their prison, they still have a telescope, as if that was an important or meaningful part of their life. So I think the game is trying to paint the prisoner as an explorer. We also have to consider their personality. They are just a little bit different than everyone else. Only having one antler, they have to at least feel a little bit odd, like the odd one out at times, even if they aren't treated that way. This may leave them more open-minded to go against the wishes of their species at times. And if the prisoner really was an explorer at heart, I don't see the eye's importance fading to them once they see that vision. After having found a signal coming from an object in space that was so special and important to the entire species that they destroyed everything they loved and risked it all to go and find the signal, it would make sense to me that a true explorer wouldn't abandon that goal simply because they received a vaguely scary vision, especially after giving up so much and traveling so far to find it. And we have to compare that to what the alternative is that the Alks gave the prisoner. Let's all go die so we can live in a tiny simulation and ignore reality together forever. Isn't that a huge leap from let's go explore the universe and seek this grand knowledge from an intriguing signal? And when we finally make it to the ancient glade, once we bring our friend with us, they tell us something interesting. That their species were simply terrified by the eye and its capabilities. That they were so worried about their story being over that they tried to hide from the truth. But I think any level-headed person would sort of be more afraid of what happened to the Alks. I think I'd much rather watch the entire universe end and be reborn than be trapped in a simulated reality for eternity. But the big kicker here in the prisoner's speech at the end of the ancient glade is when the eye's possibilities come up. The prisoner tells us, whatever happens next, I don't think it is to be feared. And I think that's what's at the heart of the prisoner's decision to shut down the eye's silencing probe. The simple fact that they aren't as scared of the eye as the rest of their species is, likely as a result of being the odd one out and having an open mind and being an adventurer at heart. And we have to keep in mind how important the eye's signals seem to the Alks to start with. They literally destroyed their whole home moon, which they loved dearly, and built churches dedicated to worshipping the eye. And we know the prisoners still had the eye symbol after they received the bad vision, so it seems like they were still worshipping it after that as well. And if something you worshipped was literally possibly within your reach, well, you might just go for it as well. But this is only one aspect of the seemingly strange choices the prisoner makes. After we free them from an approximately 300,000 year imprisonment, their second action when finally outside of the vault is to extinguish their artifact and deload themselves from the simulation. So why would they persevere for so long only to deload when they're finally free? And I think this one is a bit easier to answer. Regardless of the actual motives for the last question, it's clear that the eye of the universe is very significant to the prisoner. And while it doesn't seem like our vision to the prisoner tells them much, luckily for them, it tells them exactly what they were searching for. By showing the prisoner the Nomai's history, we showed them one very important thing. Someone actually did receive the eye signal in the short time frame in which the prisoner set it free. And not only that, the symbol for the eye is actually what inspired the little hatchling to grow up and become an astronaut. So if it's at all possible, it's likely that this hatchling that is our new friend would likely be looking for the eye as well. To me at least, it makes sense that someone who worshipped an object, someone who risked everything to free that object from the probe that muted its call, someone who tells us that they hadn't even dared to hope that the signal were to be found in such a brief time span in which they set it free, would persevere and wait out their days for any sign that their actions were meaningful to the universe. And upon learning that they were in fact meaningful, it makes sense to me that someone in that position would feel vindicated after all this time. And to me, that's what I hear every time I hear the prisoner howl after we show them that reel. They are letting pride, excitement, regret, and sadness all wash over them. And though they can't be a part of that adventure, they are just glad that they're able to make it possible for someone else. And maybe even secretly wishing through all this years that they would somehow be able to make that final journey to the eye on their own somehow. But I really don't know. The method of storytelling and how little we are shown about the prisoner makes this all hard to say for certain, which is very frustrating for someone who's trying to pin down concrete lore. But to me, it seems like the prisoner simply wasn't afraid of the vision they received from the eye, and they just went on worshipping it as if almost nothing had changed. Then, after risking their neck to free the signal, and keeping in mind all they gave up before this to have even reached the eye and learn what they have to begin with, they persevere to see if they were able to actually accomplish anything significant with their actions. And we are able to show them in that short vision that they have in fact done that. And after this, I see no motivation for the prisoner to actually continue to suffer for any longer. Free or not, they've done all they wanted to do. So they leave us a touching message to say farewell and promptly deload themselves from the simulation. And honestly, I really can't blame them. When you think about it, how different is the prisoner's vault to the rest of the simulation? While bigger and having more locations to visit, the principle is basically the same. It's a place that you're confined to for the rest of eternity. The only real difference I can see is being able to socialize and play games with the other Alks and whatnot, which yeah, is significant, but after 300,000 years, I have to imagine that they're all just about as bored as the prisoner is. And I'm not sure the prisoner would get a warm welcome home to get that luxury even though they're free anyway. So it sort of seems like this is a logical choice to me after having learned that they were suffering so long for something that was actually worth it in the end. But that's just one man's opinion. I think I rambled long enough. If you liked the video, consider liking it and subscribing to the channel, because that really does help. And let me know what you think the prisoner's motivations were down in the comments below. And as usual, a special thank you to the members here on the channel. And as always, this is the Lore Explorer diving deep into the game so you don't have to.